My cubicle at Veridian Dynamics in San Diego is a carefully curated exercise in gray. The walls are gray. The carpet is a slightly different, more depressing shade of gray. The computer monitor is gray. My life from 9 to 5 is an endless spreadsheet of accounts receivable, a silent, orderly world of numbers that is as predictable as it is soul-crushingly dull. I am Leo Pascual. I am an accountant. And I am, for 8 hours a day, the human equivalent of the color beige dot, but for one glorious hour. In the middle of this monochrome desert, I have an oasis. Lunchtime, my lunch is not a sad, prepackaged sandwich or a microwaved cup of noodles. My lunch is my rebellion. 'Tis my connection to a world of vibrant color and explosive flavor. A world that is a million miles away from this gray, air-conditioned box. My lunch is my daily trip home. I cook every Sunday for the entire week, my small apartment kitchen transforming into a fragrant, steaming laboratory of memory. I make my mother's chicken adobo, the soy sauce and vinegar reducing into a perfect tangy glaze. I make my father's sinigang, the sour tamarind broth so sharp and savory it makes my eyes water. But my real specialty, the dish I am most proud of, is my Lola's Care, a rich peanut-based stew with tender oxtail that falls off the bone. I learned to make it from the master herself, over a series of long, crackly video calls to her small, sun-drenched kitchen in Sabellum Antique. I would prop my phone up on my counter in San Diego, and she, from her home half a world away, would guide me. "Indie po," she would say, her voice a warm musical rasp. "Grandson, not so much heat. Let the peanuts toast slowly. Patience, Leo. Good food is about patience." For me, that food is more than just lunch. It's a story. It's the taste of my childhood, of fiestas, of family. It's the 1 hour a day I can close my eyes and feel the warm, humid air of the Philippines instead of the recycled chill of the office. It is my one small and deeply personal act of defiance against the gray. And Chad, the apex predator of our office, was about to make it his personal mission to take that away from me. Chad is the star of our sales department. He's a former college football player from USC, a mountain of a man with a booming voice, teeth as white as bleached coral, and the unshakable, God-given confidence of a man who has never been told no in his entire life. He moves through our quiet accounting department like a conquering hero, all backslaps and obnoxious nicknames. He calls me Numbers. As in, "Hey Numbers, run those Q3 projections for me. Will ya, buddy?" He discovered my food by accident. About 2 months ago, I was heating up a container of my Lola's Care in the break room microwave. The smell, rich and savory with toasted peanuts and bagoon, filled the small, sterile room. Chad, who was in the middle of a loud, boastful story about some client he had just landed, stopped mid-sentence. "Dude, what is that smell?" he asked, sniffing the air like a bloodhound. "Oh, it's just my lunch," I said quietly. He walked over and peered into the microwave. "What the hell is it?" "It smells amazing." "Skrizza." He didn't wait for an answer. "Skrizza." He opened the microwave, took my container out, and before I could even protest, he dipped his finger right into the stew and tasted it. A flagrant violation of all known laws of office etiquette. "Whoa," he said, his eyes wide. That's legit." "What is that, like a Filipino peanut butter stew?" "Weird, but awesome." He clapped me on the shoulder, leaving a greasy handprint on my shirt. "You're all right, Numbers, for an accountant." That was the beginning of the end. A week later, my lunch was gone. I had packed a generous portion of chicken adobo. I went to the break room fridge at noon, and my labeled container was simply not there. I assumed I had forgotten it at home. The next day, it happened again. This time, it was pork sizzig. I knew I hadn't forgotten it. I saw it in the fridge that morning. That afternoon, I saw my empty, telltale Tupperware container in the trash can under Chad's desk. The man was stealing my lunch. I am not a confrontational person. My entire personality is based on the quiet, orderly resolution of problems. So I tried to handle it with passive, non-aggressive dignity. The next day, I placed my lunch beef Mikado, this time in the fridge with a polite, neatly written note taped to the lid. Hi, I think there's been a mix-up with the lunches lately. This container belongs to Leo Pascual. Please be careful. Thank you. That afternoon, I overheard Chad and his sales bro cronies laughing by the water cooler. You guys see the note from Numbers? Chad guffawed, holding up my little post-it. So sad someone is eating his weird foreign food. He crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. My lunch, of course, was gone. The next day, I tried a more direct approach. I saw him walking towards the break room at 11:55 a.m., like a shark circling for feeding time. I intercepted him. Hey, Chad, I said, my voice barely a squeak. I cleared my throat. Hey, Chad, can I talk to you for a second? He looked down at me, a full foot taller than I was, a look of bored amusement on his face. What's up, Numbers? It's about my lunch, I said, my heart hammering in my chest. I think you've been accidentally taking it from the fridge. I was just hoping you could be a little more careful. He just stared at me for a beat. And then he let out a great booming laugh. Oh man, is that what this is about? He clapped me on the shoulder again, a gesture that was less friendly and more of a show of physical dominance. Relax, buddy. It's just food. You bring in this amazing stuff, and you can't expect a guy like me, with my metabolism, to not get a little curious. You should be flattered. Giving your food exposure. He winked. Don't be so uptight. It's just lunch. And then he just walked past me into the break room, and I have no doubt took my lunch. I stood there, my face burning with a mixture of shame and a new, unfamiliar feeling, a deep, simmering, and utterly powerless rage. He wasn't just stealing my food. He was mocking my politeness. He was telling me that his whims were more important than my property, that my feelings were irrelevant, that I was, in the grand scheme of the office, nothing. He was a bully, a classic textbook alpha male bully. And I was his new favorite toy. The final straw. The insult that finally broke the dam of my lifelong non-confrontational nature came a month later. It was my birthday. My mother, knowing I was homesick, had overnighted me a special insulated package from her home in Oregon. Inside was a feast. Her own perfect homemade care, the dish my Lola had taught her and she had taught me. It was my absolute favorite food in the world, a taste of pure, unconditional love. I brought the large container to work, my mouth watering all morning in anticipation. It was a special occasion, a birthday treat. Even put a new, more direct note on it. This is my birthday lunch from my mother. Please do not eat it. Seriously, I went to the fridge at noon, and it was gone. I felt a profound, almost out-of-bodied calm. The rage was so pure, so absolute, it had burned away all the other emotions. I walked from the break room out into the main office space, and I saw it. Chad was at his desk with his two sales buddies, and they were all digging into my mother's care with plastic forks. Right out of the container, and then I heard the words that would change everything. I don't know, man, Chad said, his mouth full of my birthday lunch. It's good, but it's a little weird, right? This peanut butter beef stew thing, it's giving me a little heartburn. He laughed. Don't tell Numbers I said that. Don't want to hurt the little guy's feelings about his mom's weird foreign food. He had not just stolen my lunch, he had not just ignored my pleas. He had insulted my mother. He had insulted my grandmother. He had insulted my culture. He had taken my one little piece of home, my one connection to my family, and he had literally and figuratively trashed it. Right in the middle of the office, I stood there, invisible in the doorway of the accounting department, and I watched him wipe his greasy mouth with the back of his hand and throw the now empty container into his trash can. The war was on. My politeness had failed. My notes had failed. My direct appeals had failed. The time for quiet, reasonable, non-confrontational Leo Pascual was over. It was time to introduce Chad to a different side of my heritage, the side that knew how to handle a bully. The side that knew that some dishes are best served cold. Or, in this case, volcanically, apocalyptically hot. The final straw was not a singular event. It was a symphony of disrespect, a multi-layered masterpiece of casual cruelty. And the artist, the composer of my misery, was Chad. The occasion was my 27th birthday. My mother, from her home, in Oregon, had done what Filipino mothers do best. She had expressed her love through an obscene amount of painstakingly prepared food. She had overnighted an insulated package containing my favorite dish in the entire world. Her magnificent Kare-Kare dot. It was a thing of beauty. A rich, savory stew of oxtail and tripe, so tender it melted in your mouth, all swimming in a thick, luxurious sauce of ground peanuts and toasted rice. It came with a small sealed container of her homemade bagoong, the salty, funky, fermented shrimp paste that is the dish's essential soul-completing companion. It was not just a meal. It was a care package from home. It was a hug in a Tupperware container. I brought it to the office with a sense of quiet, happy reverence. This was not just another lunch to be scarfed down at my desk. This was a celebration. I placed it in the break room fridge, and to protect this most sacred of meals, I put a new, more direct note on it, a plea to the universe and to the one specific monster who haunted our office's communal food storage. I wrote in big, black, capital letters, "This is my birthday lunch. IT is a gift from my mother. Please, for the love of God, do not eat IT, Chad." I thought, naively, that a direct appeal to a sense of decency, to the sacred bond between a man and his mother's cooking, might actually work. I have never been more wrong in my entire life. I went to the fridge at exactly 12:30 p.m., my stomach growling in anticipation. I opened the door. The spot where my large, clearly labeled container had been was now a glaring empty void. I just stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space, a cold, hollow feeling spreading through my chest. The denial came first. Maybe someone moved it. Maybe it's on a different shelf. I searched, my hands getting colder with each carton of yogurt and sad-looking salad I pushed aside. But I knew, I knew it was gone. The anger came next, a hot, familiar flush. But it was quickly replaced by a profound, soul-deep sadness. He had done it. He had actually done it. He had read my note, a note that explicitly mentioned my mother, my birthday, and he had still taken it. The sheer, callous disrespect of it was what truly broke me. I walked out of the break room, a ghost at my own birthday feast. And then I saw him. Chad. He was holding court at the large table his sales team had claimed as their own. Right in the middle of the open plan office, he and his two cronies were gathered around my container of care, my birthday gift, my mother's love, and they were shoveling it into their mouths with plastic forks. I stood by the doorway, partially hidden, and I watched it. And what I heard was the sound of my lifelong conflict-averse nature, finally, blessedly, dying a fiery death. "I'm telling you, dude, it's like a peanut butter beef stew," Chad was saying, his mouth full of my oxtail. "It's weird, but I'm kinda into it." "What's that stinky purple stuff?" one of his friends asked, pointing his fork at the small container of bagoong. "I don't know, man," Chad laughed. "Smells like bait. Staying away. From that, the stew is good, but it's giving me a little heartburn already." He took another massive bite. "Don't tell numbers I said that," he added, a conspiratorial grin on his face. "Wouldn't want to hurt the little guy's feelings about his mom's weird foreign food." And that was it. That was the sound of the snap. The final overstretched sinew of my patience, of my politeness, of my deeply ingrained cultural desire to keep the peace just broke. It was not just about a stolen lunch anymore. He had taken something personal, something meaningful. something that was a direct expression of my family's love, and he had consumed it with a casual, dismissive contempt. He had called my heritage, my mother's love, weird foreign food. He had reduced my entire culture to a punchline. It's a funny story to tell his friends while he literally ate my birthday present. I didn't say a word. I didn't confront him. I just turned around and walked away. I walked past my gray cubicle, past the rows of my silent, complicit coworkers, and I walked straight into the empty, echoing stairwell. I sat down on the cold concrete steps, the distant, muffled sounds of the office a world away. And I sat there in the quiet, and I let the rage burn. It was a clean, pure, and beautiful fire. The kind, gentle, non-confrontational Leo Pascual had left the building, and in his place was a man who was about to become a culinary war criminal. My first call was not to HR. It was not to my mother to tell her what had happened. It was to the one person in the world whose wisdom on matters of justice and food was absolute. I called my Lola. The 13-hour time difference meant it was early morning in Cybulum. The video call connected, and her beautiful, wrinkled, smiling face filled my screen. She was in her kitchen, the familiar sound of a rooster crowing in the background. "Leo Apo Ko," she exclaimed, her voice a warm, familiar hug. "Happy birthday, Kumosta ka. How are you?" "I'm okay, Lola," I said, my voice tight. "But I have a question, a cooking question." She leaned closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing with a chef's intensity. "What is it?" I told her the story. I told her about the man at my work. I told her about my mother's care, and I told her the exact words he had used to describe it. The warm, loving smile on my grandmother's face slowly, magnificently disappeared. It was replaced by a look of such profound ancestral offense that it was almost terrifying. "He said what?" she asked, her voice a low, dangerous growl. Abba. This Americano, he has no respect. No Yutong na lube. He eats your mother's food, a gift, and he calls it weird." She let out a string of angry, rapid-fire canaria that I'm pretty sure was a series of ancient agricultural curses. "I need to teach him a lesson, Lola," I said, my voice full of a cold, quiet fury. "A lesson he will never forget." A slow, wicked, and utterly beautiful smile spread across my Lola's face. "Good," she said. "A man who does not respect the food does not respect the family. And a man who does not respect the family must be taught a lesson in fear." She leaned in, her eyes glinting. "You do not argue with a dog who steals from your table, Apo. You give him a meal that will make him respect the cook for the rest of his life." "What do I make, Lola?" I asked. My revenge began not with a bang, but with a shopping list. The weekend after my disastrous birthday was not spent in a state of sulking or despair. It was spent on a quest, a culinary pilgrimage. If I was going to build a weapon, I needed the finest, most authentic components. My first stop on Saturday morning was Seafood City, sprawling Filipino supermarket in a strip mall off the freeway. The moment I walked through the automatic doors, I was home. The air was a chaotic, beautiful symphony of smells. The salty tang of dried fish, the sweet, yeasty aroma of the in-store panaderia baking fresh pan de zel, and the sharp, funky perfume of the durian freezer case. It was the scent of 1,000 family parties, 1,000 Sunday lunches. It was the smell of my heritage. I moved through the aisles with the quiet focus of a man on a mission. I bypassed the snack foods and the instant noodle packets. I was here for the real stuff, the building blocks of my Lola's magic. I found the perfect cut of pork belly, a beautiful layered piece with just the right ratio of fat to meat. I found the cans of pure unsweetened coconut cream, the gata imported from a farm near my mother's hometown. I found the jar of bagoong alamang, the potent shrimp paste, a brand my Lola swore by. Each item I placed in my cart felt like a piece of armor, a component for the delicious, terrible bomb I was about to construct. My last stop, however, was not in that friendly, familiar world. My last stop was a journey into the heart of darkness. I drove to a small, sketchy-looking specialty store in a different part of the city, a place called the Pepper Pot. The inside was dim, the walls lined with hundreds of bottles of hot sauce with names like Satan's Blood and the Reaper's Kiss. An old man with a long white beard and a mischievous glint in his eyes stood behind the counter. "What can I do for you, son?" he asked. "Looking to hurt yourself?" "Something like that," I said. "I'm looking for fresh peppers. The hottest you have." The old man's eyebrows shot up. He grinned. "Ah," he said, "a man of culture. I have some lovely habaneros, some ghost peppers." "No?" I said, my voice low and serious. "I need the Reaper." He just stared at me for a moment, and then he let out a low whistle. "The Carolina Reaper," he said, his voice now full of a new respect. "The king, the god, the beautiful, terrible God." He disappeared into a back room and returned a moment later, holding a small brown paper bag with the reverence of a priest handling a holy relic. He opened it for me to look inside. They were beautiful. They were about the size of a plum, brilliant, fire engine red, their skin wrinkled and gnarled with a distinctive scorpion-like tail at the end. They didn't look like food. They looked like a warning from nature. They looked like solidified, crystallized pain. 2 million on the Scoville scale, the old man said, his voice a reverent whisper. "Purest capsaicin. It will feel like swallowing the sun." "You're not planning on feeding this to anyone without their consent, are you, son? 'Cause that's not just a prank. That's a lawsuit. It's for a special occasion." I said, my face a mask of pure innocence. "It's a very, very special recipe." He sold me 3 of the little red demons. As he handed me the bag, he gave me a solemn warning. "Wear gloves, son," he said. "And for God's sake, whatever you do, do not touch your eyes." Sunday was the day of creation, the day of the ritual. My small, quiet kitchen became a temple. I laid out all my ingredients, the sacred and the profane, the rich pork belly, the creamy coconut milk, the fragrant garlic and ginger, and next to them, the small paper bag containing my 3 little agents of chaos. I set up my laptop on the counter and made the most important call of the week. My Lola's smiling, beautiful face appeared on the screen, live from her own sun-drenched kitchen in Sibilum, APOKO. She said, her voice crackling over the thousands of miles of ocean, "Are you ready to learn the secret of my fire?" "I'm ready, Lola," I said, tying on an apron. "Good," she said. "Now, listen to your grandmother. The secret to a good Bickle Express is not just the heat, it is the balance. The creaminess of the gata must be a soft bed for the fire of the chili to sleep on. It must be a hug and then a slap, not just a slap." For the next 2 hours she guided me. She was a patient, joyful, and brilliant teacher. She taught me how to render the pork belly so the fat was crispy but the meat was tender. She taught me how to saute the garlic, onion, and ginger until their fragrance filled my entire apartment, a beautiful, savory perfume. She taught me how to temper the coconut cream so it wouldn't curdle, how to simmer it slowly, patiently, until it was thick and rich and luscious. We laughed, we told stories. I told her about my week. She told me about the new gossip in her village. It was more than a cooking lesson. It was a transfusion of love, of culture, of a strength I had forgotten I possessed. "Now," she said, her face serious, "it is time for the fire. The Siling Labujo, the little bird's eye chilies. You have them?" "I have them, Lola," I said, holding up the small, fiery red peppers. "Good," she said. "For a family meal, for people you love, you use 5, maybe 6. You slice them, and you let their warmth bloom in the cream." She paused, a wicked conspiratorial glint in her eye. "But this meal, this is not for family. This is for a thief. A disrespectful boy. So today you will use 10. 10, I asked, my eyebrows shooting up. 10, she confirmed, a savage grin on her face. Let him feel the warmth of our family's hospitality. After I had added the 10 red chilies, after the stew had simmered into a perfect, creamy, fragrant masterpiece, my Lola gave me her final blessing and signed off. And now I was alone. The traditional part of the recipe was complete. It was time for my own secret and diabolical innovation. I went to my closet and got the tools I had bought from a hardware store. A pair of thick rubber chemical gloves and a pair of industrial-grade safety goggles. I felt like a mad scientist. I took out the small paper bag from the pepper pot. I took out one single, beautiful, and terrible Carolina Reaper. I handled it like it was a piece of weapons-grade plutonium. With my gloved hands, I placed it on a separate, dedicated cutting board. I took my sharpest knife, and I began to mince it. The smell that rose from the pepper was not a food smell. It was a chemical smell. It was a smell of pure, concentrated, malevolent heat. My eyes, even behind the goggles, began to water. I minced it until it was a fine, almost microscopic pulp. A bright red, toxic paste. And then, with the reverence of a priest offering a sacrifice, I scraped the pulp off the knife and into the pot of my beautiful, perfect Bickle Express. I stirred it in, watching the red flecks of death disappear into the creamy pale green sauce. The trap was set. The bomb was armed. The stew was now not just a slap. It was a full-blown declaration of thermonuclear war. I took a tiny, cautious taste from the tip of a clean spoon, avoiding any fleck of the Reaper. The flavor was incredible. The rich, savory pork, the sweet creaminess of the coconut, the sharp funk of the shrimp paste, and the pleasant, slow-building warmth of the 10 bird's-eye chilies. It was, without a doubt, the most delicious thing I had ever cooked. And underneath, that beautiful, seductive flavor lurking like a silent, patient shark, was a world of pure, unadulterated, and unimaginable pain. I let the stew cool. Then I carefully ladled it into my nicest, cleanest Tupperware container. It looked beautiful, wholesome, a perfect, loving meal, prepared with care. There was no sign of the apocalyptic fury that lay dormant within it. It was a perfect, delicious, and utterly unforgivable lie. Wednesday, August 6th, dawned with the cool gray promise of another forgettable day in corporate America. But for me, it felt like Christmas morning. I woke up before my alarm, my body thrumming with a nervous, joyful, and slightly unholy energy. Today was the day of reckoning. Today was the day of the Bickle Express. I walked into the Veridian Dynamics office building carrying my lunch bag, not like an employee, but like a secret agent carrying a briefcase with a bomb in it. The container inside felt impossibly heavy. A small plastic vessel of culinary justice. The air in the elevator, usually smelling of stale coffee and desperation, seemed to crackle with a new electric potential. Or maybe that was just me. My first stop was the break room. It was empty, as it always was at 7:30 a.m. I opened the fridge, the fluorescent light humming over the sad collection of yogurts and leftover salads. I took out my creation. It looked beautiful. The creamy, pale green coconut sauce was flecked with pieces of tender, savory pork and bright slivers of green chili. It was a perfect, wholesome, and completely fraudulent picture of innocence. Then I placed the final piece of my trap. I had written a new note. I taped it firmly to the lid, my handwriting a deliberate, slightly shaky scrawl. The handwriting of a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It read, "Chad, I know you'll see. This, please, not today. This one is special. Leo. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive bait. The direct address to him, the pleading tone, the implication that this particular lunch was somehow more sacred than the others. It was not a request. It was a challenge. It was a bright red flag waved in the face of an arrogant, charging bull. I knew his ego. He would not be able to resist. I placed the container in the most visible, accessible spot in the fridge, right at eye level. I closed the door, the soft click of the seal sounding to my ears like the arming of a warhead. The trap was set. The next 4 hours were the longest of my entire life. I sat at my desk trying to work. I stared at spreadsheets, the numbers, swimming in front of my eyes. Every minute that ticked by on the digital clock on my computer screen felt like an hour. The entire mundane world of the office seemed surreal. A slow-motion play where all the other actors were oblivious to the ticking bomb. I had placed in the middle of their stage my co-conspirator, my work friend Sarah from the cubicle next to. Me was a nervous wreck. She had been my confidant through the entire saga of the stolen lunches, her outrage a constant supportive balm to my simmering frustration. I had, of course, told her about my plan. "Are you sure about this, Leo?" she whispered, leaning over the gray fabric wall that separated us. Her eyes were wide. "What if he has an allergic reaction or something? You could get fired or sued. If he's allergic to respecting other people's property, that's about it," I whispered back. "And I'm not worried. My Lola's recipe is a hug and a slap. This one is just a slightly more aggressive hug." Chad arrived at 9, a whirlwind of loud noise and cheap cologne. He strode past my desk without a glance, on his way to the sales floor too, I assumed. Begin his day of shouting into a headset and lying about delivery dates. "Smells good in the break room today, numbers." K boomed to the office at large. As he passed, someone's wife packed them a good one. He had no idea. The sheer beautiful irony of it was almost too much to bear. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. As the morning wore on, the siren song of my creation began to work its magic. The break room was just down the hall from my desk. I could see the steady stream of my colleagues as they went to get their morning coffee. Each time the fridge was opened, a new, fragrant wave of the bickle expressed the rich scent of the coconut cream. The savory notes of the garlic and shrimp paste would waft out into the office. I heard Susan from marketing sniff the air and say, "Oh my God, what is that amazing smell?" The bait was not just visual, it was atmospheric. I was filling the entire office with an irresistible aromatic promise of a delicious lunch. A lunch that was not for them, to keep my own sanity, to keep from staring at the clock and vibrating out of my chair with nervous energy. I put on my headphones and thought about the stories my Lola used to tell me. Specifically, the stories about the clever mouse deer, the Palandoc. In all her tales from Sabellum, the Palandoc was the weakest and smallest animal in the forest. But he was also the smartest. He was always being hunted by the big, strong, arrogant animals, like the tiger or the crocodile, and he always won. Not by fighting them, but by outsmarting them. He would use their own pride, their own hunger, their own arrogance against them, leading them into traps of their own making. I looked over at the sales floor, at Chad, the office tiger, so loud and confident and sure of his place at the top of the food chain. And I looked at my own reflection in my dark monitor, the quiet, small, unassuming mouse deer of the accounting department, and I smiled. The tiger was hungry. And I had just laid out the most delicious, most tempting, and most beautifully poisoned trap he had ever seen. At precisely 12:01 p.m., the exodus began. The great gray beast of the office stirred as my colleagues began to rise from their desks and make their daily pilgrimage to the break room. This was the moment of truth. Sarah and I pretended to be deep in conversation about a spreadsheet, our eyes furtively tracking the movements of our target. We watched Chad and his two cronies swagger towards the kitchen. We watched them laugh and joke as they perused the contents of the fridge. And then I saw it. The moment of decision. I watched, as if in slow motion, as Chad's large, meaty hand reached into the fridge and took my container. He pulled it out and showed it to his friends. I could see him pointing at the note, a big, arrogant grin on his face. He said something, and his friends roared with laughter. He had seen the note not as a plea, but as a personal invitation. The bull had not just seen the red flag. He was charging right at it. He didn't even bother to heat it up. Kay strutted back to his desk, my beautiful Tupperware container held aloft like a trophy he had just won. Kay sat down, the container on the desk in front of him, a king before his conquered feast. His friends pulled up chairs, eager to watch the show. Let's get a taste of the spoils. You are a terrible, terrible person, Sarah whispered to me. Her voice a mixture of horror and giddy, uncontrollable excitement. No, I whispered back. My eyes locked on the scene unfolding across the office. I'm just a really, really good cook. Chad opened the container. Even from 50 feet away, I could imagine the scent that wafted up, the rich, creamy, an utterly fraudulent promise of a delicious meal. Oh yeah, he said, his voice loud enough for the whole section to hear. That's the good stuff. Numbers really outdid himself today. Took his plastic fork. He dug it into the stew, pulling up a massive heaping forkful of the tender pork belly and the creamy chili flake sauce. 'Twas a perfect, beautiful, and utterly lethal bite. He raised the fork to his lips, a triumphant smirk on his face, aimed directly at me. He was not just stealing my lunch, he was making sure I was watching. I just smiled back, a small, quiet, and beatific smile, the smile of a humble mouse deer, about to watch a tiger swallow a hand grenade. He put the fork in his mouth. The first bite was a moment of pure theatrical bliss. Chad, with the triumphant air of a conquering king, scooped up a massive forkful of my Bickle Express and shoveled it into his mouth. He closed his eyes, a look of sublime, almost religious ecstasy on his face. Oh man, he mumbled, his mouth full of pork and coconut and righteous justice. He looked at his two cronies, who were watching him with the eager anticipation of hyenas waiting for the lion to finish his kill. Numbers has outdone himself. This is the best one yet. Seriously, he didn't even wait to swallow. He dug in for a second, even bigger bite. He was not just eating my lunch, he was performing. He was making a grand public spectacle of his dominance, of his complete and utter ownership of me and my pathetic little ethnic foods. He wanted me to see. He wanted the whole office to see. And I, from the quiet safety of my cubicle, gave him the audience he so desperately craved. I watched my face, a mask of calm neutrality, as the tiger greedily swallowed the beautiful, fragrant, and exquisitely poisoned bait. For the first 30 seconds, he was in heaven. The rich, creamy coconut milk, the savory depth of the shrimp paste, the tender, perfectly rendered pork belly, my Lola's recipe was a masterpiece. It was without a doubt the most delicious thing he had ever stolen. I had designed it that way. The hug before the slap. The beautiful, gentle lullaby before the screaming horror movie began. The first sign that something was wrong was a small, almost imperceptible cough, little hitch in his throat. He took a swig from his giant bottle of water. Who? He said with a confident chuckle. Got a little kick to it today? Numbers. His friends laughed. I just smiled. The ghost has not yet arrived, I thought. He is merely knocking on the door. He took a third bite. And that's when the knocking stopped, and the door was kicked clean off its hinges. The Carolina Reaper is a strange and terrible fruit. Its heat is not a sudden, violent explosion like a habanero. It is a slow, creeping, and exponential tide of pure, molten pain. It builds, and I watched it build on Chad's smug, arrogant face first. A single, perfect bead of sweat appeared on his temple, then another. Then a fine, dewy sheen covered his entire forehead. His confident smile faltered, replaced by a look of faint confusion. His chewing slowed. He swallowed a hard, difficult gulp. Dude, are you okay? His friend asked. Your face is getting really red. I'm fine, Chad insisted, but his voice was an octave higher than usual. He fanned his mouth with his hand a gesture of nonchalant bravado that did not match the look of rising panic in his eyes. It's got a real afterburn, a real slow burn. The burn was now accelerating, started to blink rapidly, his eyes beginning to water. A single fat tear rolled down his cheek, then another. The flush on his face deepened from a healthy red to an alarming shade of crimson. He began to hiccup, small, violent, percussive jolts that shook his entire massive frame. "Hick, seriously?" "Seriously, man," his other friend said, backing his chair away. "Slightly. You look like you're having an allergic reaction." "Not hick." "Having hick? An allergic reaction?" Chad insisted, though his words were now punctuated by these involuntary full-body spasms. He grabbed his water bottle and chugged the entire thing. It was a rookie mistake. Water doesn't quench a capsaicin fire, okay? It just spreads it. The pain was now clearly reaching a new, magnificent level of intensity. His mouth was hanging open, and he was panting, short, shallow breaths, like a dog in the summer heat. The polite professional hum of the office was beginning to be disturbed by the strange animalistic sounds coming from the sales department. People were starting to look over their cubicle walls. The panic set in. This was no longer a joke. This was a full-blown 5-alarm physical crisis. Chad shot up from his chair, his eyes wide with a terror I had only ever seen in nature documentaries. He looked like a wildebeest who had just realized the friendly-looking log in the river was, in fact, a crocodile. "Milk." He gasped, his voice a strangled, desperate croak. "I need milk." He scrambled away from his desk and sprinted towards the break room. He heard a crash, the sound of the fridge door being ripped open with a force it was not designed to withstand. A moment later, he was back, a carton of someone's half and half in his hand. He ripped it open and began to pour the contents down his throat, a river of white cream dribbling down his chin and onto his expensive shirt. It did nothing. He was now crying openly, thick, fat tears of pure, unadulterated agony streaming down. His crimson face, Q's hiccuping and crying and panting all at the same time. He began to pace, a wounded, magnificent beast. Q's big body unable to contain the sheer volcanic fury of the pepper. He was making a low, keening sound now, a half-moan, half-scream that was causing actual, real-life accountants to stand up and stare. Their faces a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. And then, the moment I had been waiting for. The moment of true public and career-ending humiliation. The regional vice president of sales, a man whose approval Chad craved more than anything in the world, was in the middle of a major company-wide video conference call from the main boardroom. Chad, in his blind, all-consuming agony, did not see the closed door. He did not see the meeting in progress sign. He burst through the door. A sweating, crying, milk-stained, hiccuping mess of a man. I teased, melting my face. He screamed, his voice a tortured, high-pitched wail. I, along with the rest of the office, could see the video call projected on the large monitor in the center of the sales floor. We saw the look of pure, thunderstruck horror on the VP's face. We saw the faces of the 50 other sales managers from across the country, all staring in stunned, silent disbelief at the spectacle of Veridian Dynamics star salesmen having a complete and total nervous breakdown in the middle of their quarterly review. Chad, realizing where he was, a flicker of horrified comprehension cutting through his pepper-fueled madness, turned and fled. He didn't just walk out of the boardroom, he sprinted. He sprinted, screaming through the entire open plan office. He sprinted past the marketing department. He sprinted past the hushed, terrified ranks of human resources. He sprinted past my own cubicle, and for a glorious, beautiful fraction of a second, our eyes met. His were wide with pain and betrayal and a new, profound, and deeply satisfying understanding. He knew this was not an accident. This was a reckoning. He reached the emergency exit at the far end of the office, slammed the push bar with the force of a linebacker, and disappeared into the hallway, his agonizing screams echoing behind him. The office was silent, utterly, completely, and beautifully silent. The only sound was the distant, tinny voice of the VP on the video conference monitor, saying, "What in the name of God was that?" Then, from somewhere in the marketing department, a single suppressed snort of laughter, then another. And then the entire office, the entire quiet repressed. And Chad terrorized office erupted into a wave of quiet, hysterical, and cathartic laughter. Sarah was staring at me from over our cubicle wall, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of pure terror and absolute, unadulterated awe. "Oh my God, Leo," she whispered. "What did you do?" I looked at the chaos, at the smug, satisfied smiles on the faces of my coworkers, at the empty, desecrated Tupperware container on Chad's abandoned desk. I thought of my mother's insulted care. I thought of my Lola's beautiful, wicked smile. Make him see. The ghosts of his ancestors, she had told me. I looked at Sarah and I smiled. Calm, quiet, and deeply, deeply satisfied smile. "I just shared my lunch," I said. Then I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out the simple, safe, and completely unweaponized turkey sandwich I had packed for myself, and I took a slow, deliberate, and victorious bite. The king was dead, and my lunch from this day forward was safe. The 15 minutes after Chad's spectacular, screaming exit were the quietest, most productive 15 minutes in the history of Veridian Dynamics. The entire office was frozen in a state of stunned, blissful silence. The phones were not ringing. Keyboards were not clacking. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant, fading echo of a grown man shrieking about his face melting. It was beautiful. Then, slowly, like the world waking up after a solar eclipse, the office began to stir. People blinked. They looked at each other, their faces a universal mask of, "Did that really just happen?" And then the whispering started. It was a low, excited buzz that spread from cubicle to cubicle. I saw Susan from marketing peeking over her wall, catching the eye of David from IT. They shared a small, conspiratorial, and deeply joyful smile. The power dynamic of the entire office had been fundamentally, seismically altered. Chad, the loud, obnoxious sun around which the sales department orbited, had just gone supernova in the most humiliating way imaginable. And I, Leo Pascual, the quiet, ignored moon of the accounting department, was now a silent, gravitational force. No one said anything to me directly, but as the afternoon wore on, I felt the change. People would walk past my desk and give me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of respect. Brenda from HR, a woman who had never acknowledged my existence, actually smiled at me when she passed by the coffee machine. My own boss, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, walked past my cubicle, paused, looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated terror, and then scurried away. Sarah, my co-conspirator, wheeled her chair over to my desk, her face a mask of awe. "Leo," she whispered, her voice full of a giddy, breathless energy. "You are a legend. A quiet, terrifying culinary legend." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my face a perfect mask of professional innocence as I stared intently at a spreadsheet. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "The entire office knows. We don't know how you did it, but we know you did it. The VP is on a rampage." The client on the video call hung up. Chad's boss is in a closed-door meeting that has been going on for an hour. You didn't just give him heartburn, Leo. You nuked his entire career from orbit. She was right. Chad did not return that afternoon. His desk sat empty, a silent testament to his defeat. The only thing left of him was my Tupperware container still sitting there, a small plastic, smoking crater at the center of his professional life. Later that afternoon, a company-wide email came out from HR. Subject: a reminder on Workplace. Professionalism, the memo, was a masterpiece of vague corporate cowardice. It talked about the importance of maintaining a professional atmosphere during client-facing calls and respecting communal spaces like the break room. It mentioned a new, stricter policy on bringing in outside food with excessively strong aromas. It never mentioned Chad by name. It never mentioned me. It was perfect. I had gotten away with it completely and utterly. My revenge was a perfect crime. That evening, I left work exactly at 5 o'clock. As I walked out, I felt the eyes of the entire office on me. They were not looks of pity or suspicion. They were looks of deep, profound, and grateful respect. I had become a folk hero. The quiet accountant who had finally stood up to the office. Bully, not with fists or with angry words, but with pork, coconut milk, and a chili pepper forged in the fires of hell. I got home to my quiet apartment. The first thing I did was put on my apron. I needed to wash the memory of my weaponized cooking away with an act of pure, simple, loving cooking. I made myself a gentle, soothing chicken tinola, the clear ginger broth a balm to my own excited soul. As I ate, I set up my laptop on my small kitchen table. The time difference was perfect. It was late evening for me, which was early morning in the Philippines. I dialed my Lola daughter face, appeared on the screen, bright and smiling. "Apo ka?" she said cheerfully. "You are calling me again so soon. Do you need another recipe?" "No, Lola," I said, a slow, happy smile spreading across my face. "I'm calling with a report about the special lunch I made." Her eyes lit up with a wicked, joyful glee. "Abba, tell me everything. Did the tiger eat the poisoned goat?" "He did, Lola," I said. "He ate it with great enthusiasm. For the next 30 minutes, I recounted the entire story of Chad's meltdown in loving, glorious detail. I told her about his initial arrogant enjoyment. I described the first beat of sweat, the rising panic, the desperate chugging of the half and half. When I got to the part about him screaming, "It's melting my face," my grandmother, my sweet 90-year-old Lola, let out a great, booming, unrestrained cackle of pure, unadulterated joy. She was laughing so hard she had to wipe tears from her own eyes. "Mayo," she roared. "Good! That is my grandson. You have the spirit of a warrior." I told her about him crashing the VP's video conference, about his final screaming retreat from the office. I told her about the quiet, respectful nods from my coworkers. She listened to the entire story with the rapt attention of a child, listening to a fairy tale. When I was done, she was silent for a moment, a look of deep, profound satisfaction on her face. "Good," she said again, her voice now quiet, full of a deep ancestral pride. "You have learned a very important lesson, Leo. There are many kinds of strength in this world. There is the strength of the loud voice and the big fist. That is the strength of the bully. It is a hollow strength. But there is another kind, the quiet strength. The strength of the patient mind. The strength of the clever hand. The strength of your ancestors, the fishermen and the farmers who knew that you do not shout at the storm, you build a better boat." She looked at me, her eyes full of a love that could cross oceans. "Today, you did not shout. You cooked. You built a better boat, Apo, and you sailed it right through the middle of a storm." We talked for another hour. We didn't talk about revenge anymore. We talked about family. We talked about home. We talked about what kind of fish her brother had caught that morning in the sea off the coast of Sibalam. When we finally hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the empty bowl of tinola in front of me. The rage was gone. The resentment was gone. The feeling of being a small, powerless victim was gone. All that was left was a feeling of deep, warm, and profound peace. The revenge, in the end, was not the point. The screaming, the hiccups, the humiliation, that was just the punctuation. The real victory was in the making of the dish. It was in the connection to my family, to my culture. It was in the long, loving conversation with my grandmother. It was in the rediscovery of the quiet, patient, and formidable strength that had been inside me all along. Chad had tried to take my lunch. Instead, I had taken back my soul, and it tasted delicious. The 15 minutes after Chad's spectacular, screaming exit were the quietest, most productive 15 minutes in the history of Veridian Dynamics. The entire office was frozen in a state of stunned, blissful silence. The phones were not ringing. Keyboards were not clacking. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant, fading echo of a grown man shrieking about his face melting. It was beautiful. Then, slowly, like the world waking up after a solar eclipse, the office began to stir. People blinked. They looked at each other, their faces a universal mask of, did that really just happen? And then the whispering started. It was a low, excited buzz that spread from cubicle to cubicle. I saw Susan from marketing peeking over her wall, catching the eye of David from IT. They shared a small, conspiratorial, and deeply joyful smile. The power dynamic of the entire office had been fundamentally, seismically altered. Chad, the loud, obnoxious sun around which the sales department orbited, had just gone supernova in the most humiliating way imaginable. And I, Leo Pascual, the quiet, ignored moon of the accounting department, was now a silent, gravitational force. No one said anything to me directly. But as the afternoon wore on, I felt the change. People would walk past my desk and give me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of respect. Brenda from HR, a woman who had never acknowledged my existence, actually smiled at me when she passed by the coffee machine. My own boss, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, walked past my cubicle, paused, looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated terror, and then scurried away. Sarah, my co-conspirator, wheeled her chair over to my desk, her face a mask of awe. "Leo," she whispered, her voice full of a giddy, breathless energy. "You are a legend. A quiet, terrifying culinary legend." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my face a perfect mask of professional innocence as I stared intently at a spreadsheet. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "The entire office knows. We don't know how you did it, but we know you did it. The VP is on a rampage." The client on the video call hung up. Chad's boss is in a closed-door meeting that has been going on for an hour. You didn't just give him heartburn, Leo. You nuked his entire career from orbit. She was right. Chad did not return that afternoon. His desk sat empty, a silent testament to his defeat. The only thing left of him was my Tupperware container still sitting there, a small plastic, smoking crater at the center of his professional life. Later that afternoon, a company-wide email came out from HR. Subject: a reminder on workplace professionalism. The memo was a masterpiece of vague corporate cowardice. It talked about the importance of maintaining a professional atmosphere during client-facing calls and respecting communal spaces like the break room. It mentioned a new, stricter policy on bringing in outside food with excessively strong aromas. It never mentioned Chad by name. It never mentioned me. It was perfect. I had gotten away with it completely and utterly. My revenge was a perfect crime. That evening, I left work exactly at 5 o'clock. As I walked out, I felt the eyes of the entire office on me. They were not looks of pity or suspicion. They were looks of deep, profound, and grateful respect. I had become a folk hero. The quiet accountant who had finally stood up to the office. Bully, not with fists or with angry words, but with pork, coconut milk, and a chili pepper forged in the fires of hell. I got home to my quiet apartment. The first thing I did was put on my apron. I needed to wash the memory of my weaponized cooking away with an act of pure, simple, loving cooking. I made myself a gentle, soothing chicken tinola, the clear ginger broth a balm to my own excited soul. As I ate, I set up my laptop on my small kitchen table. The time difference was perfect. It was late evening for me, which was early morning in the Philippines. I dialed my Lola daughter face, appeared on the screen, bright and smiling. "Apo ka?" she said cheerfully. "You are calling me again so soon. Do you need another recipe?" "No, Lola," I said, a slow, happy smile spreading across my face. "I'm calling with a report about the special lunch I made." Her eyes lit up with a wicked, joyful glee. "Abba, tell me everything. Did the tiger eat the poisoned goat?" "He did, Lola," I said. "He ate it with great enthusiasm. For the next 30 minutes, I recounted the entire story of Chad's meltdown in loving, glorious detail. I told her about his initial arrogant enjoyment. I described the first beat of sweat, the rising panic, the desperate chugging of the half and half. When I got to the part about him screaming, "It's melting my face," my grandmother, my sweet 90-year-old Lola, let out a great, booming, unrestrained cackle of pure, unadulterated joy. She was laughing so hard she had to wipe tears from her own eyes. "Mayo," she roared. "Good! That is my grandson. You have the spirit of a warrior." I told her about him crashing the VP's video conference, about his final screaming retreat from the office. I told her about the quiet, respectful nods from my coworkers. She listened to the entire story with the rapt attention of a child, listening to a fairy tale. When I was done, she was silent for a moment, a look of deep, profound satisfaction on her face. "Good," she said again, her voice now quiet, full of a deep ancestral pride. "You have learned a very important lesson, Leo. There are many kinds of strength in this world. There is the strength of the loud voice and the big fist. That is the strength of the bully. It is a hollow strength. But there is another kind, the quiet strength. The strength of the patient mind. The strength of the clever hand. The strength of your ancestors, the fishermen and the farmers who knew that you do not shout at the storm, you build a better boat." She looked at me, her eyes full of a love that could cross oceans. "Today, you did not shout. You cooked. You built a better boat, Apo, and you sailed it right through the middle of a storm." We talked for another hour. We didn't talk about revenge anymore. We talked about family. We talked about home. We talked about what kind of fish her brother had caught that morning in the sea off the coast of Sibalam. When we finally hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the empty bowl of tinola in front of me. The rage was gone. The resentment was gone. The feeling of being a small, powerless victim was gone. All that was left was a feeling of deep, warm, and profound peace. The revenge, in the end, was not the point. The screaming, the hiccups, the humiliation, that was just the punctuation. The real victory was in the making of the dish. It was in the connection to my family, to my culture. It was in the long, loving conversation with my grandmother. It was in the rediscovery of the quiet, patient, and formidable strength that had been inside me all along. Chad had tried to take my lunch. Instead, I had taken back my soul, and it tasted delicious.